This episode of Mission Log is brought to you by HostGator.com. Do you need to launch your own website? If you're looking for one of the easiest ways to register, host, and build your site, you should check out HostGator.com. They have tools to help you get started immediately, whether you're transferring a domain or building your site from scratch. So, all you fans who want to open up, here's a look at my robotguts.com or drcorbyforever.net or Ken is secretly a robot.org. You can just head over to HostGator.com and have that up before we're done with today's episode. Speaking of drcorbyforever.net, a .net address is the best way to get a good domain name these days. Grab your .net today. It gets better, though. HostGator has 24/7 tech support on the phone, live chat, or email, and you can choose from shared or dedicated servers. All that plus packages that include unlimited storage and unlimited bandwidth. Order now with the coupon code MissionLog, and you'll get 30% off at HostGator.com.
Now entering Nerdist.com.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. Episode 73, The Lights of Zetar.
Welcome into Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm Ken Ray. Oh, hey, whoa. Is that Zetarian, John?
Sorry. I ate peanut butter before doing the show.
Oh,
Make that mistake again.
No, it's an old broadcasting trick. Eat lots of peanut butter before you start.
Very, very sorry. But what I was trying to say is that I am John Champion.
Yay!
And all of you, are listening to Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. And today, Ken, we're talking about the Lights of Zetar.
Zetar?
Yes, Zetar.
Oh, see, I was hoping it was Zetar.
Because
then I could be all like, I play Zetar. I don't know why. The whole time, though. The whole time. Like, I read the thing and I was like, yeah, that's it. And they hardly say it throughout, so...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we don't really learn who they are until later.
No, the reveal. They're the fifth business in this whole thing, right? We're kind of talking about them the whole time, but we don't know who they are. But then they come on screen and you're like, yeah, it's still her.
Yeah. Look, bunch of lights.
It was actually very good to see the back wall of the skating rink where I grew up getting work, though. I mean, that was really...
Yes.
That was just all I could think about the whole time.
Yeah, cool.
Well,
Very
that and
good.
playing Zetar. Wah!
Nice.
Yeah.
So, Ken, before you tell us all about the Lights of Zetar and how lovely those lights are,
yes,
we have a little bit of other business to take care of. First of all, before we get to trivia, though,
what? Wait a minute.
We get to trivia,
oh, you faked me out.
I faked you out.
Yeah.
I want to let you and I want to let all of our listeners know, if they don't know already, I want them all to check out 1701news.com because that is a Roddenberry-associated Star Trek news website edited by Michael Hinman, and it's fantastic. I visit there at least once every couple of days. They've got articles on what's happening in the world of Star Trek, all of Star Trek, kind of the latest on what is happening with new movies. And when you get into the columns, they actually run columns that can talk about some of the same things that you and I might talk about on Mission Log. Some of the bigger ethical, moral, philosophical issues that are raised by Star Trek. So if you have not checked it out, please check out 1701news.com.
So now do we do the thing?
Now we do the thing.
All right, go for it then.
Now it's time for the thing. Okay, a few points of trivia for the Lights of Zetar. First, this episode, this blew my mind the first time I heard about it. It was written by Sherry Lewis of Lamb Chop fame. And there are probably a lot of people in our audience who have no idea who that is.
I refuse to believe this is true.
It is absolutely true.
All
so
right.
Sherry Lewis, who was known for children's TV, she was really one of the first stars of children's TV for her hand puppet, Lamb Chop. She and her husband, Jeremy Tarcher, wrote this episode. She was a Star Trek fan, And actually, she wrote the character of Mira with herself in mind. She wanted to play that role. She was a big enough fan that she wanted to be on the show. She did not get the role. Spoiler alert, in case you didn't know.
How much does that suck?
I know. That's kind of unfortunate. But hey, she had a very big and thriving career on her own, primarily known for her work in children's television. Some of the funny bits of trivia about her, she once submitted a recipe for lamb chops to TV Guide.
Nice.
They had a celebrity recipes thing, and I think that's brilliant.
Actually, I tried her recipe for lamb chops one time.
Yeah.
Little stringy.
It tasted like an old sock, did it? Yeah. That's too bad.
Yeah.
It's really too bad. And this is interesting. Lamb Chop, so not just Sherry Lewis, but Lamb Chop testified before Congress in 1993.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember that?
I would imagine that was taken very seriously.
Well, the context of that is that there was a hearing about educational TV. And you may remember this, where you had a lot of TV stations, networks, producers putting out all of this stuff. Like, you put on the G.I. Joe cartoon, and then you justify it being an educational show by running the little 30-second PSA at the end.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Congress was saying, look, we're trying to mandate that producers at networks go a little above and beyond here and actually do educational TV. So like Saturday mornings, you have all this block of time, do some educational TV. Sherry Lewis is there to say, look, I've been doing educational TV forever and ever. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money. It doesn't have to take a lot of time. We should do it. We should be doing more educational TV. And then Lamb Chop chimed in.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, I think that's where your problem is.
That's what happened.
I mean, nobody any offense. I'm sorry. I mean, look, you can't compete against G.I. Joe with Lamb Chop. You just can't. I mean, unless you're like 3.
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, so for Sherry Lewis to say it doesn't have to cost much, well, no, because what you did was put a sock on your hand.
And it cost nothing.
In like late 1950s, early 1960s television, when you have like 2.5 channels, maybe. People will watch what's on because, what's on is like 3 channels at that point.
Right.
You go all the way to like 1993 when we have like close to 50 or 60 channels. Mm-hmm. And now it'd just be crazy. Well, actually now, there's a better chance of Lamb Chop doing well in television as we talk today.
You think?
Well, because television has gotten so like weirdly segmented at this point that you can have a whole channel for like sock puppets.
Well,
in fact, I'm thinking
maybe that's the thing that we do.
Yep.
Yeah.
You and me, pal. The sock puppet channel.
Coming sometime in the 21st century.
Call your cable or satellite provider for the sock puppet channel. Please go ahead. Please continue. Please,
okay,
for the love of God, continue.
The story that she wrote was originally rejected, then accepted later on by producer Fred Freiberger. But yeah, that's kind of the backstory to Sherry Lewis and her association with Star Trek and the Lights of Zetar. We also have to say a welcome back to Lieutenant Call.
Lieutenant Call is here, yeah.
Yeah. He was played by John Winston. This is sadly the last of his 11 appearances in Star Trek, the original series. But Carl does turn up again later in Wrath of Khan. Also worth pointing out that he was in an episode of The Man from U.N.C.L.E. with Nancy Kovac, who we may remember from A Private Little War, and Ricardo Montalban. That episode being the King of Diamonds affair. And we're also introducing ourselves to Jan Schutan, who played Lieutenant Mira Romaine. She has several TV shows to her credit, but no real breakout roles. Some of the ones that stood out to me, she appeared on Rod Serling's Night Gallery. She appeared on The Andy Griffith Show. She was in an episode of The Outer Limits with Lord Garth himself, Steve Enot.
It's Lord Garth. Oh, you said that, didn't you?
I said it. Yeah, I beat you to it.
Is Sherry Lewis seriously saying there's not educational value in G.I. Joe? Everything I know about Cobra I learned from G.I. Joe. And knowing is half the battle.
Prologue. The Enterprise is on the way to Memory Alpha. Apparently the website's down. So they have to go there to transfer everything anyone in the Federation has ever known ever into its memory banks. Along to assist, Specialist Lieutenant Mira Romaine. She'll help install the new equipment on Memory Alpha. And Scotty is very, very openly and very much in love with her. And she seems kind of into him too. So this is going to go well. On the bridge, everyone is talking about Scotty's infatuation. Everyone, that is, except Kirk, who would really like Scotty to pay attention to his duties, and Spock, who's congratulating Lieutenant Romaine on her first assignment for the Federation. So, in love and first time out. How could this not go well? On their way to Memory Alpha, the ship picks up a high-intensity reading. Pretty lights, many colors. It might be a storm, but it's coming right at them, moving faster than the speed of light. So not a storm, then. The Enterprise is quickly enveloped. The light is blinding. Kirk cannot speak. Lieutenant Romaine stares blankly as the lights from the phenomenon fill her eyes. Like it's in her eyes. Like if you cracked one of her eyes open like an egg, the light would pour out of it. And things seem to be going so well for her. Act 1. The phenomenon moves on. Kirk regains his voice, ordering Sulu to get them out of there. Lieutenant Romaine collapses. She's practically catatonic, except for some weird gurgling sound. McCoy shoots her up with something and she comes round. Romaine says she's fine, but Kirk orders her to sickbay for evaluation. Scotty wants to go, but Kirk tells him to stay at his post. Assessing their situation, everyone seems to have had a different reaction to the incident. Uhura couldn't move her hand. Chekhov couldn't move his eyes. Sulu couldn't speak. Spock can't say why it happened, but it looks like different areas of the brain were under attack for each of them during the incident. And Lieutenant Romaine seems most susceptible. In sickbay, Scotty comes to check on Romaine, who is extremely argumentative with Dr. McCoy. "I'm fine. What's wrong with me? You're the doctor." Scotty thinks it might be space sickness, which seems less like a sickness and more like a thing that happens to people sometimes on their first time in deep space. McCoy says, "Maybe, so how about I do the doctory thing and find out?" Romaine is still being argumentative, though McCoy tells Scotty to tell Romaine that if she wants a career in Starfleet, she'll need to learn discipline and cooperation. Romaine is concerned that all that's going to go into her record and that she'll be drummed out of Starfleet, but Scotty assures her that that's silly. It's just space sickness. On the bridge, Sulu has figured out where the phenomenon is going, straight for Memory Alpha. Spock says that'll be bad. Apparently built on the information wants to be free principle, Memory Alpha has 0 defensive capability. And Memory Alpha is hit. Then the phenomenon moves on just as the Enterprise makes orbit. Sensors indicate that the complex and its people are dead. Kirk calls to Scotty for a consultation. He's not in engineering, though. He's still in sickbay with Lieutenant Romaine. Kind of annoys Kirk, but whatever. He and McCoy need to get to the transporter room. Alone in sickbay, something strange happens to Romaine. The lights of the phenomenon twinkle in her eyes. Then she sees a dead humanoid laid out in a chair. Down on Memory Alpha, sensors were right. Everyone and everything is dead, including whoever it was that Romaine saw in her vision. Also, a lot of Memory Alpha's information has been decimated. Act 2. Turns out there is one person alive, but just barely. She's making the same gurgly noise that Romaine made when the Enterprise was hit by the phenomenon. Then she turns several colors. Then she dies. McCoy says her brain was seriously messed up by the phenomenon. In fact, everyone on Memory Alpha had a different center of the brain destroyed. Kirk has Romaine beamed down to Memory Alpha. He asks her what she was saying in that gurgly way after the phenomenon. She has no memory of that. Kirk says it sounded exactly like what the technician was saying right before she died. This is, of course, the first Romaine has heard of any dead anybody. She rushes into the room of bodies and sees the one from her vision. Immediately she says they have to get out of there, that the phenomenon is coming back. It will kill them. They all argue with her, but sure enough, the Enterprise hails them. That thing is coming back, and fast. The landing party is beamed back aboard, though there's some trouble beaming Romaine back. She seriously cannot catch a break. The Enterprise leaves Memory Alpha's orbit and is soon being pursued by the phenomenon. Romaine explains to Scotty about her precog moment, seeing the dead guy before she knew there were dead people. Scotty suggests she keep that to herself unless she wants to spend the rest of the trip in sick bay. It's just space sickness. Back on the bridge, the phenomenon is matching the Enterprise move for move. Not trying to overtake the ship, but not letting it get away either. Spock says it's not an it, it's a they. Beings of some sort. 10 of them apparently, though who and what they are is unknown. They could seriously mess up the Enterprise, though. Kirk decides to try talking to them. Hey, you guys are kind of killing us here. And by kind of, I mean actually, so maybe leave us alone. The phenomenon moves to block the Enterprise as we head to commercial. Act 3. The light show is now headed straight for the Enterprise. In engineering, Lieutenant Romaine has another of her visions, though this time the audience is not privy to what she sees. On the bridge, Kirk's had enough with this talking business. He orders Sulu to fire near, not at, the phenomenon. The phenomenon is still coming. Kirk orders Sulu to shoot straight at the middle of the thing this time. That stops the phenomenon, but here's a wrinkle. When the phasers hit the phenomenon, Lieutenant Romaine feels the effects. Screaming, she crumples to the floor. Scotty calls the bridge. Knock it off with the phasers. You're killing Lieutenant Romaine. Kirk orders Scotty to get her to sickbay. So, they can't shoot the phenomenon without killing Romaine. Spock says they'll have to find something that'll kill whatever it is, but not her. Kirk gathers Spock, McCoy, Romaine, and Scotty to try to work through a solution. Not to freak you out, Lieutenant Romaine, but all of this seems to be tied into you somehow. McCoy says she is exceptionally pliant to new situations. After a bit of questioning and examination, it appears that Lieutenant Romaine's brainwaves are a match for the alien phenomenons. They shouldn't be. They didn't used to be. But there you go. The thing is taking over Lieutenant Romaine. Around the time of that realization, the phenomenon starts closing in on the Enterprise. Kirk orders standard evasive maneuvers. Scotty comes clean at this point. Lieutenant Romaine has been trying to tell him and everyone else all along that something was up, but Scotty thought it was just space sickness and kept her quiet. Lieutenant Romaine finally reveals what her latest vision was. She saw Scotty dying. Romaine's a bit freaked out that her thoughts had not been her own. Also, she would rather die than hurt Scotty. Scotty says, knock off that dying talk. We're going to fight, and we're going to win. Sulu calls Kirk. Evasive maneuvers have been useless. Things still gaining. Kirk has an idea. Romaine should give in to whatever is trying to take her over. Once it has some control, they can get it out of her and kill it. She agrees, and just in time, too. The light show overtakes the Enterprise. Act 4. The alien light show converges on Lieutenant Romaine. She tries to both cede control and retain her identity. I'm Mira Romaine. I will be who I choose to be. Yeah, hold that thought. Suddenly, it's not her voice speaking. They say they are from Zetar. Kirk says, no, everything from there died like 1,000 years ago. They agree. The bodies died, but the desires, the hopes, the mind and will of the last 100 of Zetar lived on. Kind of. They've been looking for those 1,000 years for someone through whom they can see and speak and live out their lives. Kirk says Romaine's got her own life to live, but they say she'll learn to live with it and with them. Learn like the people of Memory Alpha learned, asks Kirk. We did not kill them, say the Zetarians. Resisting us killed them. Kirk says the cost demanded by the Zetarians is too high. Romaine must live her life. Then Romaine herself pipes up. Life was given to me. I want to live it out. Neat, but McCoy says she's losing. The plan is this. Get Romaine into a pressure chamber. The pressure in the chamber will kill the Zetarians. Possible side effect, it may kill Romaine, but if they don't try it, everyone but the Zetarians will die. Scotty says he'll put her in the chamber. Romaine would not kill him. Of course, the Zetarians might, and they try to. Still, he gets her in the chamber. They seal it up, apply lots of pressure. The Zetarians die. Romaine and everyone else lives. Members of senior staff agree the best thing for Romaine is getting back to work. She will rebuild Memory Alpha. The end.
Ken, first question for you.
Yeah.
Scotty has actually seen a woman before, right?
He's seen a few. I think
Okay.
you might remember at the beginning of season 2, was it, when Scotty was getting slapped, up one side of the Enterprise and down the other because he kept seeing women?
Right. Yeah. He's had some troubled relationships, and then I was worried about that whole getting hit on the head thing.
Yeah.
In Wolf in the Fold, but
Yes.
boy, this is a very different Scotty in love. This is spore huffing in love, if I have ever seen it.
Right, and a little open too. Not just open in his love, but then in the captain's log in the beginning, Kirk's like, "Oh, Scotty is so in love," and when a man of his age falls in love, he realizes what a desolate wasteland the rest of his life has been.
Yeah,
and that's not an exact quote, but that's close. Yeah. It's something like the loneliness of his life is laid bare before him, or something like that. It's sort of like, wow, what a sad, pathetic individual.
That was rough.
Because
that
usually,
was a really rough thing.
When he's on camera, he's pretty happy-go-lucky, but apparently he's got like a razor blade to his wrist most of the rest of the time.
I know.
As soon as anybody's clear. But boy, is he in love. Did you get the feeling that she liked him nearly as much?
Nobody liked anybody as much as Scotty liked her. So
okay, but here's the question: was that part of the writing, or was that just like weird directing and acting?
I think that was weird directing.
Okay.
That was just me.
Because she was supposed to like him as much as she did, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Man, he was just, whew. Yeah.
But hey, it looks like he got over that whole Wolf in the Fold thing.
That's true.
So we don't have that to worry about anymore.
Yeah. Good point that.
But it does kind of, point out a thing. It's like, hey, if you have trouble maintaining normal relationships, then come join Starfleet. Because that's what we need as people who won't fall in love and are going to be sad and desolate otherwise and can really focus on the work.
Well, around that time, I mean, let's go 80, 90 years in the future. You might have a chief engineer who finds love in the most unlikely place, the Starship Enterprise. But maybe not. We don't know because we're nowhere near that yet. So
right.
I don't even know why I brought that up.
Well... here's something that I'll bring up only for our short quips, our short observations here. How many times are we going to call Lieutenant Romaine girl?
Now, you're differentiating that from when Scotty calls her lass, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I don't even remember it happening, honestly. I know that's the kind of thing that's supposed to set me off, but maybe I'm turning over a new leaf.
Well, I only bring it up because, it's one of those things that you simply would not write now.
Yeah.
If you were writing this episode now. So it feels out of place again to a modern audience. Kirk says, "How's the girl?" I'm like, well, who are we? Are we talking about Lieutenant Romaine? Right. I hope so.
The girl. Yeah, it's a good point. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a little odd. But here's the big thing that's odd to me.
Yeah.
Memory Alpha is the single biggest repository of Federation knowledge. Let's leave the doors wide open.
Yeah, information wants to be free, John.
It does. If I've learned anything from the internet.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. I mean, and it makes sense. You wouldn't want to put a shield over it because you never know who wants, wayward travelers may just want to look something up. The Klingons may come by. And that really is, sort of a wonderful, possible, moment of friendship, really, that might be. The Klingons don't know, how long does blood wine keep?
Yeah.
If only there was some repository of knowledge that we could find out. And then it becomes like a Hands Across America thing, only, successful. And better and all that. But no, we'll have to wait till some other time, apparently.
Hey, we've been battling you all this time, but hey, you've got a library.
Right.
Well, now we can talk.
Exactly. Yeah. Meteors, by the way, comets, these are also things that may want a little bit of information. So no need to protect against anything.
No, you don't need force fields.
No.
You don't need shields.
Why would you? It might send the wrong message.
Yeah.
That we're prepared for disaster. I wonder if there was a book actually in Memory Alpha. Like if you turned to Memory Alpha and said, "So, would you protect information like this?"
Yeah, right.
Right. Well, but we'll never know because it was, just disaster for the galaxy.
Yeah,
I believe is what Spock said.
It's so funny that you pointed out in your description that the internet was down, so they couldn't just download the information. They had to go to the library.
The
and
website.
To me, Yeah. It's such an entertaining thing that, 50 years later, our concept of how information is stored, how it is moved, how it's backed up is so entirely different from what the approach would have been back then.
Well, we should revisit that in the next segment because
we will.
Okay,
we will.
Yeah, let's do. Yeah.
I did dig the creepy effect of those who had been hit by the Zetarians. I thought some of those were cool. Every now and then Star Trek will do we'll dip into horror, we'll dip into comedy, we'll do more of like a hard sci-fi thing, we'll do time travel.
Yeah.
And a few episodes in the past we've done horror, sometimes well, sometimes very poorly.
Yep.
But this... Yeah, right. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, go
Remember,
ahead.
the cat is the most terrifying thing in the universe.
Ever.
Yeah.
Ever.
But if you walked in a room and there was somebody with a green glowing face and just going, that's a little, that'll unsettle you.
See, that's interesting. The green glowing face didn't do it for me, but the disembodied sort of gurgling thing really freaked me out every time that it happened. Like once you put the multicolor face thing going, then I'm like, okay, well, you've lost me a tiny bit because I don't know how that skin is generating that light, or is it the light's coming from inside them, or what. But if you just do the thing where it's like there's absolutely no movement, there seems to be absolutely no sense to the person, but you're still getting, wow, I'm going to have nightmares.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you a question. The effects that the Zetarians have on the people that they are affecting.
Yeah.
They're sort of different because, and sometimes they're deadly and sometimes they're not.
Right.
A lot of that seemed kind of random to me.
Yeah, well, I don't think it was random. Well, I mean, it was random in that I think everybody's brain was going to be different. So basically the sense that I got was Zetarians are running sort of like a test program in a way on every brain. And they've been doing this for like 1,000 years, by the way. Looking for one person. Okay. Right. Whatever. So, but they run the test program, and then there are just going to be different points where it's going to fail, right? So, like, let's say they get the first 10%, and then there's Chekhov couldn't move his eyes, right? Was that it?
Right.
Yeah, so he can't move his... Okay, so he's out, because, we want to be able to look at more than one thing. So we're going to go ahead and leave off testing this guy. And then, I don't know, let's say you get 30% or 40% or something and you can't move the hands. Okay, so that leaves Uhura out. 50, 60, 70%, whatever. Why didn't Kirk own up to the fact that he couldn't speak, by the way? Sulu says, I couldn't speak.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And Kirk's like...
Right.
And say boo about that. So he and Sulu are actually about on par, whatever. We never heard how Spock was affected, if Spock was affected at all, which was kind of interesting. But the person who was apparently most susceptible was Lieutenant Romaine, not counting the people down on Memory Alpha. So she's like susceptible in that she falls over, but also acceptable to them in that, well, she fell over, but she didn't die. Unlike the people on Memory Alpha who apparently didn't even make it like past the first 3%. But anyway, so that was the feeling that I got, both about like why each one was affected differently, and then also when McCoy says all the people on Memory Alpha, different parts of their brain were attacked. It didn't really feel to me like different parts were attacked. It felt more like different parts failed. At least that's about the only way that I can make that whole thing work. Otherwise, it's just goofy. Yeah,
I'll
it's
buy
just
that. Yeah,
sticking sticks through different parts of their head, going, "Well, this one's broken."
Right. I'll buy that. And finally, McCoy will never hesitate to shoot somebody up with whatever is in that hypo spray. He'll just walk around and but in this one, when we get to the end, it's just like, well, you know what we have to do? We have to put her in the hyperbaric chamber now with anti-gravity, and that'll work because I'm an expert on Zetarians.
Right. We'll squeeze the light right out of her. And then somehow that will kill the light.
Right. It'll kill the light.
But not her. She'll be fine. Yeah. We're going to crush light with this machine. But her human body will be A-okay.
Wow, Sherry Lewis writes an episode of Star Trek where the guest of the week is someone else's puppet.
Ken, you and I had the same thought, I think, going into this episode. Or
Yeah, part of it.
getting to a certain point in this episode.
Yep.
The Library of Alexandria. So for those who don't know, this is one of those kind of almost urban legend that it has gained now at this point. One of the wonders of the ancient world, not literally, but yeah, it was a wonder. The Egyptians, starting in about the 3rd century BCE, created this center of intellect in Alexandria. And the idea was to bring together all of the knowledge of the world, from Greece, from Rome, from Egypt, from everywhere that was the known world. And they would hire scribes who would copy everything, just every document, every book, everything. They even said that as ships would come into port, they would take whatever written materials were on those ships, take them to the library, hire the scribes to make copies, and then give back either the originals or in some cases give the copies back to the people who had it so they could keep the originals. But the idea here was to transcribe everything to papyrus. Because,
Right.
of course, before that, everything was carved in stone.
Right.
And they had literally hundreds of thousands of scrolls encompassing tens of thousands of works stacked up in this massive library. And it was open to everyone. Everyone could go there and learn. And they were divided up like a modern library. You would have areas of intellectual interest. You would have medicine and astronomy and all the topics worth considering, religious papers, whatever. So it's kind of gained this mythical status because then over a period of several hundred years it burned. And a lot of that knowledge was lost. Now, some of it was saved because after multiple fires, copies were moved from one library to another. So, but it's one of those great what-if stories. If that library had survived the way it was, that we would know so much more about the ancient world and potentially have not hit those points in human history where progress sort of stops, where we stop learning. And so that's the first thing I thought of with the whole concept of memory alpha. I love the idea that we will try that again, but hopefully we'll build shields.
Well, hopefully we'll build shields, or, I mean, what I said earlier was, I want to touch back on this a little bit later. It's so interesting to me when Star Trek comes so close to hitting how the future was going to be, but then misses wildly.
Yeah.
Just like on some things, like the idea of memory alpha is kind of a neat idea, I guess, but I almost would rather see a junk planet. Or a secondhand store planet or something like that. Because what we're going to lose is the physical stuff. Now, granted, we may have some sort of horrible, disaster where the entire population of the Earth gets destroyed and we lose all of the information because there's nobody left to run the generators that keep, all of the power going and things like that. But, I mean, we're going to have bigger problems at that point. I mean, there will be nobody to read the stuff anyway. Okay. I'm sorry, forgive me. I know that went like 5 places, and it made a lot more sense.
No, I got it.
It's the physical things that we're going to lose, it seems to me. The Resolute desk is going to be fine because it's going to stay in the White House, and so we'll always have that treasure map underneath of it too. But, like the desk that I'm sitting at right now and desks like it, or like I've got an old phonograph from the 1920s that's just kind of a neat thing. And there aren't as many of them as there used to be. And one day there will be no more of them. That's the kind of thing I would like to see a planet dedicated to, because it's just silly to me to think that we're going to take all of this information and put it someplace.
Yeah.
And that's the part that's weird. I mean, Star Trek gets the whole thing, like you said during Court Martial. Originally, they were going to flip a tape on a tape recorder so that they could tape everything, right? And somebody watching it, I can't remember, was it Roddenberry? Was it Gene Roddenberry who said it's not going to be tapes?
Right. Yeah. It was. I don't think it was Gene, but it was somebody from research. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and they're right. It wasn't going to be tapes. And we still say, I'm going to tape a show later, but there's no tape involved in anything I do anymore unless I'm wrapping a present.
Right.
There's no tape. So it hits on things like that. But then it's like, oh, well, all of this knowledge is going to be one place. And Spock is like heartbroken because all of this knowledge was lost. And it's just a silly idea at this point that, destroying any one building is going to lose you, any amount of information, any real information. It's just kind of interesting. I can't fault them for that because, you can't, predicting the future is dicey. I mean, look at the outfits they wore in Star Trek: The Motion Picture. It can be a very difficult thing guessing the future.
Right. It's
always interesting to me though, like when they hit something and it's spot on, and then other times it's just swinging in a big miss, like the idea of memory alpha itself.
Right. Well, and of course, the only way to protect data is. At least, well, not the only way, but in my mind, one of the ways that you protect data is you have to keep it moving. You have to have, you can't just have memory alpha. You've got to have beta, delta, gamma.
I was going to say, there must be, is there a memory beta?
Yeah, I hope so.
Or that's just like the one where they're like, oh, what was that thing? Remember? It was, oh, what was that? Yeah. Oh, I wish we had an alpha memory around that could tell us.
Exactly. Yeah. But I don't know, it's one of those things about the episode where the episode is not about memory alpha, but for some reason I sort of latched onto that. I was more interested in that than the Zetarians.
The Zetarians are completely uninteresting. What's more interesting is Romaine.
Yeah, well, okay. In what way? Here's the thing. I touched on the kind of jokingly the sexism of calling her girl in the observations there. But to me, I felt like she was kind of a non-character. It was a lot of tell rather than show. She's brilliant because we say she's brilliant. Scotty's in love with her because we say that she's in love with her, and then Scotty overacts
I believe Scotty being in love with her. I believe that she was in love with Scotty because we were told that.
Yeah,
I mean, there was nothing that she did. She smiled at him twice.
Right.
And that really is it. She smiled at him twice. I honestly wondered if at some point, maybe when it's one of the first rewatchings of this episode, I wondered at some point is she going to complain?
Right.
Because he is just and he's got a hand on her the whole time, and he's coming on to her pretty mercilessly, it felt like, because I wasn't getting the same thing back from her until, I guess, the third act when she says that she'd rather die than hurt him or kill him. I will say that I owe my interest and appreciation of this show entirely to my wife. I did one of the rewatchings of this episode with her. She's worked with kids in the past, teens, some in a church setting sometimes, in a social work setting sometimes. A lot of times it's been troubled kids, especially. But I think because of all of that, she sort of sees things through a certain lens. So we're watching this episode, and with what really felt like very little thought to me, she says that this is a peer pressure and coming of age story. And I was just like, I don't see it for about 30 seconds. And then I couldn't see anything else after that. Well, almost. I almost couldn't see anything else. She's kind of like, she's a rebellious teen in a way. She's like, you don't tell me what to do. I know what I'm doing, sort of thing.
Sure.
But she really doesn't exactly. And she's kind of afraid, but she doesn't want to show anybody that she's afraid. And then there's the whole sort of this idea of this exercising free will thing, right? Like she's going to live her own life rather than having somebody else's ideas imprinted on her. Because that's kind of what the Zetarians are trying to do, right? They're trying to make themselves, they're trying to make her into what they need her to be or want her to be.
Okay.
And then, she says, well, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to live my own life. She's not going to be governed by their ideas. But at the same time, as long as she learns the discipline and self-control that it takes to be in Starfleet, right?
Yeah.
So, there was something, there's a weird, it doesn't exactly work, but it kind of works to me. It did feel to me like it was kind of a coming of age idea or kind of a peer pressure idea. But at the same time, it also sort of felt like a like an advertisement for the right kind of peer pressure in a way, or be this kind of free. As opposed to that kind of free. It like I say, it felt both like an anti-indoctrination episode and a pro-indoctrination episode, just being sure you're indoctrinated by the right people. And so then I didn't know if it's like, okay, so is it sort of an anti-communist thing or an anti-commune thing or an anti-cult thing? Because I kind of got that sense too. I mean, let me throw a question out to you.
Okay, do it.
Had the Zetarians found that Spock was the right person,
yeah,
would Spock have said, "Get them out of me and kill them"? Because that's what Romaine says, basically.
Right. And based on Spock's brain, I would say no.
Right.
Because, yeah.
Or based on, later Spock, and I know we're not supposed to jump the timeline, but the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few is like one of the greatest lines of Spock's ever.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think the show would have ended that way anyway, because, just like with Spock's brain, Kirk wouldn't have had it. Kirk would have said, no, Bones, come up with something, because seriously, we're going to get those things out of Spock, whether he wants them to stay there or not.
Yeah.
I don't know. That was just another thing that came up. I don't think that actually fits in exactly. I don't know.
Well, no, I like it. But since you brought that up, though, that kind of, I don't know if this has ever been approached in any of the novels or any of the sort of non-canon Star Trek, but that your description now makes me more interested in what happens to Lieutenant Romaine after, because I kind of like, she's got a lot of pressure. She's there.
Wait a minute. Wait, what do you mean after? Don't she and Scotty live happily ever after? Remember, they've got all the time in the world now. Right. I'm just thankful it didn't happen with Kirk. If it had been Kirk again, I mean, seriously, I might have thrown something at my TV.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It really bothered me, especially at the end where he says we have all the time in the world. And you see that smile from Kirk to Scotty. And I think that smile is, oh, you poor dumb son.
Yes.
I've been through this so many times just this season. We all know this is not okay. No, have your fun. You're right. You know all the time in the world. Mm-hmm. What do you got? Like 3 minutes left in this episode? All the time in the world.
Yeah.
You too.
Countdown to the credits.
You two will be so. Who?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Poor guys.
You were saying
poor ladies.
I apologize.
Well, no. I mean, it's interesting because what you're describing about Lieutenant Romaine's journey here as either part of the, shall we say, collective, let's use that word, the collective of Starfleet, then the collective of the Zetarians trying to take her over. What she needs is some time away. I think what she needs is a little time on her own, putting Memory Alpha back together, and just figure it out for yourself.
Did they leave her there by herself, by the way? I
hope not. Because all we know that's on Memory Alpha now is a bunch of corpses. And if they said, okay, enjoy. Oh, sorry about the corpses. Yeah. But
you don't mind cleaning that up, do you, sugar?
Yeah, right.
Girl. You don't mind, girl?
Yeah.
Hey, girl. Clean up those dead bodies for me. Okay, thanks.
Let's talk about the Zetarians a little bit, because it reminded me a lot of other Star Trek.
Who are the bad guys? I'm sorry, not to interrupt you really quickly.
Yeah.
Who are the bad? Because I think this will take much less time than what you're going to talk about, I believe.
Okay.
Who are the bad guys in the Empath? And I know you're going to want to say the writers, but No,
the Vians.
Yeah, okay, the Vians. So there's like a disease going around in season 3, at least for these two. The Vians are all like, hey, we didn't kill your compatriots. They just couldn't take it.
Yeah, right.
And now meet the Zetarians, who are like, hey, we didn't kill them. Their resistance to us killed them.
Yeah.
Okay, you know what, really?
Yeah.
Because I'm going to say, that was still you.
Right.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I did notice that parallel, though. Yeah. That very, very good point. But I look at the Zetarians like this. Okay? They've been roaming the galaxy for a very long time. For
1,000 years.
For a suitable host.
Yep.
Which 1,000 years is nothing to Commissioner Beale or Loci, but for the Zetarians, that might be a long time. And they didn't mean to kill. No, it's just that we couldn't stand up to what they were doing.
Right.
And they even communicate with us once they have taken over a human. And I just kept thinking, well, could we take them back to Sargon's planet and put them in one of those mind containers and say, here, wait another 50,000 years. Could we share the plans for the android bodies with them? Maybe can touch with, whoever's left with in Dr. Corby's old lab.
Yeah.
It just seemed like handled a different way. Is there anything that we could have learned from them or reasoned with them at any point? Because to me, the failing here is that it seems like such a cut and dried story. Aliens take over. They're not really bad, but they're destructive. So we got to kill them in the pressure chamber. And end of story. I just feel like we've seen it before, and we've seen it go in much more interesting ways.
Well, if we make it the indoctrination, anti-indoctrination, or indoctrination, anti-indoctrination idea, then no, there's really nothing else we can do for them. They are destructive. They're destructive and they're bad, and they're not even accidentally destructive. They're willing to take her over. They're willing to push her out. They're willing to subjugate her person, herself, for their needs.
One might even say that her resistance is futile at that point.
Look at that. One wouldn't know why that would be funny at this point.
No, not at all.
But maybe someday.
Maybe.
So, I mean, I guess if we accept that possibility that was laid out earlier, that this is the problem is it's still not freedom. That's the one place that I keep getting hung up. Mm-hmm. She's going to, exercise her right to be part of the food chain that is Starfleet. And I mean, and in fairness, that is what she chose to do.
Yeah.
But it's not absolute freedom. It's just kind of like, freedom within this other construct.
Well, she still has choice, though. And even if she's with Starfleet for another week, another month, another decade, it is still her choice, and she still has the freedom to get out of that.
That's true. All right.
So, but I'm pretty sure that once the Zeterian takes you over, there's not a whole lot of choice in the matter after that point, unless you've got an anti-grav pressure chamber.
Yeah. Well, especially if it's 100 Zeterians. What was up with that? What was up with that, by the way? Spock said there were 10. They said there were 100.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
That was kind of odd.
Yeah, that was a little weird.
And then, but all 100 of them are going to be fine living through her.
Mm-hmm.
Is it like a timeshare? How do you think that works? Exactly.
Maybe.
Yeah, I would like to sleep now. I'm just saying. I mean, you got to take over while it was sleepy time. Tomorrow I would like to sleep. How would that be? No, we're not going to go fly a kite. Are you kidding me? We have no idea how long this is going to last. We're not going to waste any of this time flying a kite. No.
Ugh. Man, and if you're 98 or 99 on the list, man, you just got to listen to all of that until you get your turn.
Fascinating. Ken finds a message worthy of an after-school special in the episode written by the advocate for educational television.
Ken, we've arrived at the part of the show where there's a light, or maybe multiple lights at the end of the tunnel.
It's like a light show, dude.
It's a total light show. It's like Pink Floyd at the planetarium. We get to ask ourselves about the Lights of Zetar and recap. We get to ask ourselves, first of all, if the episode holds up. What do you think, Ken?
That's such a tough thing. Here's what I will say. I gotta, and not just to make her happy. I got to give props to my wife, because without that, I don't think I would have had any use for this episode. Once I started looking at it through that lens, it was interesting. It gave me something to think about, as opposed to what I had been thinking about the time before she and I watched it together, which was why. I mean, that was pretty much it. So I don't necessarily know. The problem that I have, obviously, with the interpretation that she presented was it still leaves me with too many questions. It still leaves me with too much like, okay, well, is this any better than that? But at least I had those questions at that point, as opposed to, why do we have to do this and when does this end? And
right.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I guess, we've said before, even bad episodes that give you a lot to think about are better than, just a straight shoot 'em up episode that doesn't do, or can be better than a straight shoot 'em up episode that doesn't leave any questions. There have been episodes, though, No, I don't know that it holds up that well, unfortunately. I didn't buy Lieutenant Romaine.
Yeah.
I certainly didn't buy Scotty's love for her. Not that James Doohan didn't, sell the fact that he was in love, but who was she last week? And by the way, will she be around next week?
Yeah, the answer is
spoiler
no.
alert. Yeah,
right.
No, she will not be around next week. So despite his thinking that they have all the time in the world, he's going to be fine just dropping her off, though, on that, dead, desolate planetoid. By the way, how does putting new machinery on there fix Memory Alpha?
Oh, yeah.
All it does is fix the machine. We've still lost, nobody remembers how to make whatever that was. Remember that thing? It had sort of it was a bit like a flan, but not exact. Look it up. Oh, we can't look it up. Right. Sorry.
Right.
I don't. So to me, it's right in the middle. It's a solid C, I would say. It's okay, but it's not. Nah, I don't know. What about you?
I think as an episode, it to me, it fails. I'm a little more negative on this than you are. Sure, it's got more going for it than some other episodes.
Yeah.
And The Children Shall Lead or The Empath or whatever. But ultimately, I just feel like there's nothing there, really. The premise is interesting, but we never explore that premise beyond just that the Zetarians need host bodies. Okay, then there's really no more substance there after that. I love the idea of Memory Alpha, but there are more interesting stories about libraries on Doctor Who. So, in fact, a very good story about a library on Doctor Who. And I think just as a production, as a slice of TV production done in the late 60s, were you ever a fan of Space 1999?
No.
Okay.
I didn't hate it. I've never really watched it. So
yeah. Well, the Blu-rays are great, and I've watched all of it. Season 1 is very interesting, but you can tell that they get to a point where they had this very interesting premise and a very cool design for their show, but then they got to a point where they just sort of didn't know what to do with the stories anymore. And if you read the episode descriptions, they all start the same way. A mysterious light shows up at Moonbase Alpha. And then the next episode, a series of mysterious lights show up at Moonbase Alpha, and this, I just felt like, well, okay, we had the light effect, and then we kind of will get into this thing of what the Zetarians are and what they need, but then it's kind of inconsequential by the time we get to the end of it.
Well, again, though, only if you're going to go hard science fiction about the whole thing. If we're assuming that the Zetarians are a stand-in for something else, whether that is, being what your parents wanted you to be rather than you being what you want to be, or the communist threat, or that crazy cult leader, down on the corner. It almost doesn't matter what the Zetarians are physically, because the real question is, are you going to be governed by somebody else's idea, or are you going to be governed by your own? Are you going to be lost to what other people expect you to be? Even 100 of them. Are you going to be lost to what other people expect you to be, or are you going to be what you want to be?
Which I think is a very interesting premise.
Right.
But I think it's a more interesting premise when it's handled with a bit more nuance. Like here, like I said, it's very cut and dried. Here's an invading alien force. Nobody has a choice in the matter. Boom, they're done.
Yeah.
But you take that idea, and if you want to go the anti-communist route or something like that, then you get into other science fiction like Invasion of the Body Snatchers or stuff like that, where I feel like there's a much more complex exploration of that idea, which I think is a cool idea.
Well, this is always the weird thing, though, about Star Trek, right? You've got a very countercultural idea with a lot of Star Trek, but then you've also got it being produced, for mass consumption by one of the 3 television networks. So you're never going to get, Love American Style was a joke. It was a comedy. Right. At the time that the sexual revolution was happening, it was something that was being laughed at on one of the major networks and being presented to people as farce. Right. So, the same kind of thing. As much as we tend to think, or people tend to think, that Star Trek is very revolutionary and very counterculturally, and it is in a lot of ways, it was still being produced by one of the big 3 networks and put out there. So, the question is, somebody's going to try to take over this kid's mind. We're going to say that this kid is going to be able to overcome that, but still live within the society, that we... you're right.
Mm-hmm.
There are much more nuanced explorations, but this is a 48-minute morality tale.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a moral to this story. Right?
Well, so then that brings us to the message. What, are you going to stick with the idea that the message here is not so much a singular message, but looking at the conflict between her sticking with her own plan or being taken in by what is forced upon her?
See, this is the problem. I still don't know. I'm still having a hard time with what exactly the message is.
Yeah.
I mean, there is this sort of living into your own thing, but, still sponsored by, in a way. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so does the message hold up? I don't know. Like I say, I would have missed it entirely.
Yeah. Right.
So maybe not.
Yeah.
There have been great episodes of Star Trek that tell a message in a not completely ham-fisted way. Mm-hmm. Maybe this message was just a little too nuanced to actually stand up, or maybe I don't know. I like the fact that it gives me something to play with, but I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's just sort of a start to go down that road. Sure, we'll look at individuality. We'll look at outside pressure. I think we're just sort of presented with that a little, but ultimately, to me, it's just invading aliens. We have to get rid of the invading aliens. Unfortunately.
All right.
But
that's what John thinks.
Yeah.
What do you think, listener? Do you mind if I call you listener? Sorry. There are a few ways to let us know what you do think. On Facebook, Skype, and Twitter, the handle is Mission Log Pod. You can call us, 323-522-5641. That number again, 323-522-5641. You can email us, missionlog@roddenberry.com. Remember, we may use your comments on an upcoming episode of Mission Log.
Ken, I have this crazy idea that we just get back together and we do it all again next week. But next week, we'll talk about Requiem for Methuselah.
Some of the music for the Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com, and from the album Messages by Key Theory, free to download at kitheory.com. Next week, new music from Mira Romaine, named the 23rd century's best Zetar player. Oh yes, she plays Zetar. She also plays for keeps. And transmission.
Now leaving Nerdist.com.